Hello and welcome to Get a Shift On, a podcast all about career transition and career change.
So I have been a GP in Scotland for 15 years, and I think I started to develop an interest in a sort of branch, a newish branch of medicine called lifestyle medicine, which is becoming bigger, gaining more traction, which is very much the kind of science and evidence behind how we live, our lifestyles, and looking at that to try and prevent disease, treat disease, manage diseases. And I think anybody who works with patients will realize what a massive impact lifestyle has on their health in all sorts of ways. So the sort of things within lifestyle medicine are obviously the obvious ones like nutrition and exercise, but it's also things like sleep, stress management, healthy relationships, avoiding risky substances, which I now include social media as being one of them. But, it's that whole picture of a person, that holistic look, and just how much impact that actually has on their physical health. So this totally fascinated me. And I suppose I started that journey because we'll go way back. Just after my first child was born, my mum died of breast cancer. And I remember distinctly thinking, I don't know what my genetics hold, but I wonder what I can do to try and put myself in as a good position as possible to not be in a similar situation where my daughter's having her first child and I'm no longer here. So that's, I think, where I started that learning. Well, what is the science behind how we live and how much impact that has on our health? And then you start going down, if you're a lifelong learner, which I think a lot of medical people are, you go down that hole and you before you know it, you've kind of really embedded into it and really interested. So I did a diploma in lifestyle medicine just after the pandemic. And I thought, right, what am I going to do with this? And one thing I definitely couldn't do was use that skill set in 10-minute appointments, because the person's literally walked down the corridor and taken the seat and you're already 2 or 3 minutes in. And to really dig into their entire life history, how they live day by day, and do it properly, and not just, are you eating enough veg? Are you, but really properly understand them as an individual in their life. I just wasn't going to be able to do that in my normal NHS GP practice. So I started to look at what I could do within GP, and I brought in group consultations, which is a way of having more time with patients. So you have 15 patients in a room, all with the same condition, and they learn from each other, and you have more time to sort of do, it's quite an efficient way of working. So I love doing that, and that was really useful. But again, there's only so much of that you can do. Your colleagues are still sitting there doing 10-minute appointments. They're not going to say, sure, go and do these lovely long afternoons with patients. So I got to a stage where I thought, right, if I'm passionate about this and this is a direction I want to go in, and I want to move, I sort of feel NHS healthcare at the moment is focused on a population health. It's about big numbers of how we get people through a system. And I wanted to have time for the individual and that individual's health. So that's where my desire to build a business, lifestyle medicine. And then I made the decision about a year, maybe 18 months before I left, that I was going to leave the partnership. So it meant giving up a good salary, giving up a good pension. I'm still, I suppose you could argue that I still have a tiny bit of me still sitting in the NHS, in that I will still do some locum work. Just because I really enjoy that. I'm constantly meeting burnt out GPs in that setting. And whilst I'm not telling them to leave the NHS, I think I'd lose my job if I tried to do that. It's about helping them just have a bigger picture as to what things they could do to improve their career, and maybe to improve their job satisfaction.
The challenges that presented meant that women were getting less choice, and I was becoming more and more unhappy in my career. And I decided, through many reasons why, some really personal, but some to do with the environment I was working in. Predominantly the environment I was working in was making me very unwell, unhappy. I decided that I was going to leave. I originally set up Birth From Within and was going to try and run it concurrently with my job, and kind of like had a bit of an exit plan, which at this point I am going to plug your exit plan, David. Brilliant idea. If I'd have known it, I would have used it. Unfortunately, I didn't have that. I kind of in my head had an exit plan, which was going to be set up my classes, do that concurrently alongside, reduce my hours, increase the business, and life would be rosy and good. But it didn't work out like that, and I left. So I kind of went from earning a relatively decent wage to absolutely nothing. And that's kind of, where the story picks up.
When we left school, I ended up going to Swansea University. It's one of the closest universities in the UK to the beach. And the whole sole purpose of that, I think our old housemaster still quotes me. And he basically just said that, yeah, it's the closest university to the beach. And then if you want to go surfing, that's the place to do it. So that was the reason. When I graduated, I got in, was working in London in advertising for some action sports magazines, and that's kind of I guess how that whole journey and world opened up. And then after that, I did that for a couple of years and had a bit of a panic attack because I didn't really want to be in London anymore. I'm from there, and I was I spent the whole time trying to escape, go down to Newquay and Croyd and Cornwall and Devon every weekend, whenever I could with friends from London. And we just thought okay, this is ridiculous. I'm commuting 4 hours, that's on a good run, It could be up to 6, 7 bank holidays and stuff. And so we hatched a plan of emigrating to Australia, and that was just before we turned 30. Oh, if we do this, we're going to need a bit more money. Although the action sports and working for the publication was great fun, I just thought I just needed to kind of just fill the bank a little bit and just try and get some savings. And from that, I went into working in IT sales, for a market research company, and did that until we left. And then when we got over to Australia, I was then again in sales, working for an events company. Before I thought, okay, maybe now was the time that I could start my own thing. And I came up with an idea for an events platform. It was an events and festivals website, which was a place to find almost like a search engine for finding fun events. It was called Rad Season. Ended up getting acquired at the end of last year. And during kind of COVID, as everyone knows, events kind of shut down globally. So I had a bit of a panic and I thought, okay, what am I going to do? I started doing a podcast, and somehow it turned into it was an action sports podcast. Basically, I was it just gives me an excuse to kind of get on phone calls and on Zoom with people that I've admired, whether that's athletes or kind of people within the industry. And yeah, that turned into a TV show. It was on a cable TV channel called Fuel TV. And that then led to Liquid Death, where I had the founder of Liquid Death on. They're a beverage, canned water, soft drinks, and iced tea brand out of the US. So that kind of led to me then working for them in lifestyle marketing.
I left Edinburgh after working in my first job, which was a lifeguard. And I went on to be centre supervisor and centre manager in the council leisure facilities in Edinburgh. I decided to take a bit of a leap of faith. I was a musician at the time, and I joined a band in London. So I left Edinburgh at 21 to go and try and make my way as a musician down in London. Relatively successful, I would say, throughout my 20s. We travelled around, we toured a bit, we recorded in some amazing studios, including Rockfield Studios in Wales, which has had every recognisable name right from the 70s through to present day. Passed through the doors there, so that was a very unique experience. And when I was in the band, that's when I picked up my first kind of bit of experience within marketing. Obviously, we marketed ourselves before we were signed to a label. We had to do it all ourselves, from graphic design, sites, organizing events and promoting them. So that was a kind of starting point for me there. I then got a job working as marketing manager for the largest music stand manufacturer. That sounds glamorous, doesn't it? In the world. They've got some pretty cool clients, actually. They work with the Sydney Opera House, Royal Opera House, pretty much every recognisable theatre across the UK. You will find products from this company. Worked with them for a few years until I decided to follow my love of the water. I learned to surf when I lived in London, which is not really a great combination.
All those waves on the River Thames. Who knew?
All those waves. So I was traveling down to Bournemouth kind of like every second weekend to go and catch some waves, and I took a chance trip down to Cornwall and absolutely loved the southwest, and decided after, I think I was about coming up for 10 years in London at that point, which if anybody is, particularly if you weren't brought up in London and then you've kind of moved there, the first few years was fantastic, but as I was getting closer to 30, I was thinking I'd like to settle down somewhere that's not going to cost me £750,000 to buy. So I moved to the Devon-Cornwall border. And it was at that point that I started Drake Walls Marketing.
I like to be able to go off and do my own thing. And so I did. I said, sorry guys, I don't want to run this past marketing anymore. Now that we have a marketing team and somebody's saying no to me, it doesn't feel right. So I'm going to go and do what I want. And Javelin was born. That was February 2023. August of 24, brought my wife into the business. It turns out we can work with each other as long as we're in separate rooms.
She's not hiding around the corner.
No. Well, I don't say anything she doesn't know to her face. Like we both agree, it's not good for us to work in the same room together. It's not fun, and that kind of brings us up to where we are today. So it's been a journey, but essentially I took the fun bits of what I enjoyed from the AI SaaS consultancy business that I was working in, and built a whole business out of that. So I was fortunate enough, I got paid to learn how to do it for 4 years. And then when it no longer fit with their business model, I went and launched my own business with it, because I still, to this day, thoroughly love getting behind the scenes of people's content.
Amazing. Explain to me then what Javelin actually does. How do you help your customers? How do you make them smile?
So I think in this day and age, everybody understands the behavioral science behind why we should be on video. Video on LinkedIn, on YouTube, like videos everywhere in the current day and age. And it's kind of like being able to have one-to-one Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, but instead of just one-to-one, you're actually talking to many people. It's one-to-many relationship, and it's really, really efficient, really effective, and it connects you on an emotional level. Whereas, 10, 15 years ago, we'd have used a lot of brand, used a lot of logos, we'd have done animations and cartoons and relied on text. But being on video allows me to look you in the eyes, you can see whether what I say is genuine, whether I've got energy behind it, whether I'm passionate about what I'm saying, and how much I believe in it. And there's no other medium out there that can compete with that. And yet so many people will do things like, you'll go on a podcast, be a guest, and then do nothing with the content that comes back from it. They'll assume the host will go away and do all of that and do all the promotion for them. People will be a speaker at a conference, or they'll be a keynote speaker, or they might do just an interview for themselves and pop it on a YouTube channel and do nothing else with it. I describe what we do as, if that's a wet sponge, we're just wringing that sponge dry and getting all of that lovely, juicy content out of there. You're absolutely, I can guarantee, if you've done any sort of video work in the past, you're sat on an absolute gold mine.
Stress is everywhere. And one thing I just want to be clear about is stress is everywhere, but it doesn't need to be bad. Stress also helps us to elevate, to be competitive, to up level what we're doing in terms of our performance, our productivity, our skill set. So it's a motivator too, but the problem is when there's just too much and we're not supporting ourselves in actually evaluating, okay, what am I learning from this? What am I taking away and implementing from this? Where it's a problem is when it's just constant and it becomes your new normal. And then you get more stressed and that becomes your new normal.
Been in the recruitment industry ever since. So very long-winded. Certainly, I can't remember the word you used, but certainly squiggly. And as you can see, 20 odd years in the industry, and then 2019, end of 2019, decided to do it for myself. Hence pivotal partnerships was evolved.
So right now I work in kind of capacity management optimization for healthcare systems across the United States. We are not yet in any other countries, but really just helping health systems figure out how to do the most with the resources that they have and help them reimagine and rethink about their operations and how to better plan for predictive outcomes and volumes that are coming into their centers.
I just wasn't going to be able to do that in my normal NHS GP.
Maybe now was the time that I could start my own thing.
You're sat on an absolute gold mine.
And now that's what I do, is help people like us who are done with the position that they're in.
You never know, it might be the making of your life.